Hello everyone. Welcome to Postcard Buddhism. Today we will talk about the topic, the meaning of vegetarianism in Buddhism. We will explore the reasons behind this practice, its significance from both scientific and spiritual perspectives, and how it embodies compassion and wisdom in daily life. Whether you're a seasoned vegetarian or just curious about the practice, join us as we delve into the profound connection between our dietary choices and the path to enlightenment. The meaning of vegetarianism in Buddhism. Vegetarianism is not a unique aspect of Buddhism, since many other religions also advocate for a vegetarian diet, such as Jainism in India. Many people, even those who do not follow Buddhism or any religion at all, practice strict vegetarianism, including many Westerners. Conversely, some Buddhists do consume meat and fish. So what is the true significance of vegetarianism in the Buddhist spirit? This essay will explore the significance of vegetarianism from three perspectives: scientific understanding, Buddhist scriptures, and different Buddhist schools of thought, and finally, a more open discussion on the topic. 1. Scientific perspective on vegetarianism. Are humans naturally vegetarian or carnivorous? Science clearly indicates that humans originally consumed fruits, roots, leaves, tubers, and plant stems. Human teeth are not designed for meat eating. They lack the sharp and long canines. Relative to body size, the human intestine is too long, averaging 18 meters. This is characteristic of herbivorous animals, as a long intestine helps efficiently absorb the low nutritional content of plants. Human ancestors lived in trees, then adapted to life on the ground, where they began eating insects found under rocks, in grass, or in tree holes. This diet is referred to as omnivorous, meaning eating anything available. Adaptation to ground life required vigilance against predators, leading ancestors to stand on two legs for a better view and to run faster. This was one of many reasons for human evolution. As human ancestors learned to stand on two legs, the position of the head relative to the spine changed, allowing the skull to grow larger towards the back, thus giving humans a bigger brain. With a larger brain and free hands, humans invented tools like carved stones and bows for hunting larger and smarter animals than insects or small creatures hiding under rocks or in tree holes. Consequently, the omnivorous diet evolved to include more meat. Over time, humans created increasingly sophisticated tools, enabling them to kill large and dangerous animals. These tools have evolved into modern-day weapons such as guns and nuclear bombs. Unfortunately, these dangerous tools are no longer used for hunting, as animals have become too naive compared to humans. These weapons are now used to kill each other to compete for and protect resources, even though the powerful nations that produce these weapons already have an abundance of food. Thanks to their brains, humans also invented language. Language has become increasingly complex, allowing humans to think about complex and abstract issues, using images and symbols to express thoughts, leading to the creation of literature, poetry, and even philosophy. Humans can find and eat almost anything, creating elaborate dishes from the flesh of various creatures. However, scientific research and medical statistics, another product of human ingenuity, consistently show that vegetarians tend to be healthier, less prone to diseases, particularly heart disease and cancer, and live longer than meat eaters. With this scientific understanding, many Westerners have adopted vegetarianism to reduce bodily pollution, limit environmental destruction, and avoid toxins and excessive nutrients from animal meat and fat. Numerous articles on vegetarianism in this vein are supplemented with statistical evidence, medical explanations, biochemical and physiological analyses. 2. Vegetarianism, according to Buddhist scriptures and schools of thought. Why do most Buddhists practice vegetarianism? Did the Buddha explicitly instruct us to be vegetarians? In which scriptures are such teachings recorded? Are those scriptures authentic? A final question often raised in various writings is whether the Buddha himself was a vegetarian. Any definitive stance on these questions can lead to endless debates. Therefore, the following discussion does not aim to directly answer these questions, but to highlight and explore several aspects of the issue. Readers can find their own suitable answers, whether leaning one way or another. Historically, Jainism, which advocates vegetarianism, predates or coincides with the time of the Buddha in the 6th century BCE. Additionally, When Mahayana Buddhism was re-established and flourished in the 2nd century CE, it strongly advocated vegetarianism. This practice had already been widespread among the general populace since the 3rd century BCE, as evidenced by Emperor Ashoka, 304 to 232 BCE, who was a vegetarian, banned animal slaughter and encouraged his subjects to adopt a vegetarian diet. Buddhist scriptures are abundant, yet they do not extensively detail or directly promote vegetarianism, possibly because it was an obvious practice for those following the Buddhist teachings. Scriptures frequently emphasize the prohibition of killing. However, one should not rely solely and simplistically on scriptures to determine a suitable way of life for oneself and the environment. It is neither practical nor advisable to rigidly adhere to scriptures, following them verbatim, and acting freely otherwise. We have seen the detrimental effects of some traditions where followers strictly bind themselves to inflexible doctrines. There are approximately 58,000 volumes of scriptures recording the Buddhist teachings, a significant number, even considering the Buddha's 45 years of teaching. This does not include the scriptures lost over time, such as the millions of volumes destroyed by Muslims, exemplified by the Buddhist library at the Deer Park, Sarnath, of which only a brick foundation remains today. There have been 3 major councils for compiling Buddhist scriptures. The first council took place in Rajagaha 1 year after the Buddha's passing. The second was held in Vaisali 110 years after his passing. During the second council, significant disagreements emerged within the Sangha, leading to 2 different schools of thought. The third council was even more complex. According to Pali scriptures, Theravada, it occurred in Pataliputra 137 years after the Buddha's passing. Mahayana scriptures, however, state the third council took place later, around 160 years after the Buddha's passing, and not in Vaisali but in Jalandhara, modern-day Kashmir. By the third council, 18 schools and 4 languages were used to record the Buddhist teachings. Due to the complexity and richness of the scriptures and doctrines, it is possible that the Tripitaka, Vinaya, Sutra, and Abhidharma were transcribed during this time, although no concrete evidence remains. Western scholars suggest that written Pali scriptures began appearing from the 1st century BCE to the mid-1st century CE, while Mahayana scriptures were transcribed from the mid-1st century BCE to the 6th century CE for some later texts. This indicates that neither Theravada nor Mahayana scriptures can claim greater antiquity or authenticity based solely on written records. Before that, both monks and laypeople memorized the teachings and passed them down orally for hundreds of years before they were transcribed onto palm leaves. Oral transmission was considered more lively, sacred, and respectful than dry written words. Thus, memorizing scriptures was a form of practice, with monks learning them by heart and lay people listening and remembering directly. The oral tradition and the late appearance of written scriptures remind us to be cautious and not to rigidly adhere to texts. Theravada Buddhism asserts no specific precept prohibits meat eating. In the Majjhima Nikaya, middle-length discourses, part of the Tripitaka, there is a story about Devadatta, the Buddha's cousin and disciple, who advocated for strict asceticism. Devadatta requested the Buddha to impose a precept forbidding monks from eating meat. The Buddha did not agree, stating, "Meat can be considered pure in 3 cases: if the eater did not see, hear, or suspect that the animal was killed specifically for them." Devadatta's biography is quite complex, often depicted as extreme and having attempted to harm the Buddha multiple times. So, how should we understand these arguments? The Buddha taught us to uphold precepts, the first of which is to abstain from killing. During his lifetime, the Buddha organized the Sangha's activities to align with the Dharma and the environment, such as the practice of Vasa, rain retreat. In India, the monsoon season is when nature and all living beings revive and flourish. Vasa was to avoid unintentionally harming nature and trampling small creatures. The Buddha taught us to observe Vasa. Would he then allow eating meat when his disciples did not see, hear, or suspect that the animal was killed specifically for them? The Buddha often reiterated in scriptures, "Be careful, be vigilant, and guard your mind. The mind always tries to deceive you." Continuing to eat meat without seeing, hearing, or suspecting its origin is a way of using one's mind to deceive oneself. The principle of interdependence in the Dharma teaches that every action, thought, and phenomenon are interconnected. Can the condition of not knowing, not hearing, not suspecting override the law of interdependence? If the law of cause and effect were that lax, what value would it hold? For instance, if we eat pork, even without seeing, hearing, or suspecting that the animal was killed for us, the pork fat can still clog our arteries. If the pig had parasites, we could still contract them. Essentially, we would directly bear the consequences of eating meat. The urge to eat meat translates into action, creating negative karma. Karma means action, and the action of eating meat necessarily involves an animal enduring pain and death, generating negative karma for us, though we may be unaware of it. However, the dietary practices of early Buddhism, if strictly followed according to the original meaning and rituals recorded in Theravada scriptures, are beneficial. Eating only once before noon to limit greed and overeating, alms rounds to avoid attachment and worry about food, consuming cold, mixed offerings from lay people to avoid enjoyment and craving. The story of one of the 16 arhats, Pindola Bharadvaja, illustrates this. He calmly ate the finger of a leper that accidentally fell into his alms bowl. Yet, aside from rural areas in Theravada countries, alms rounds are not suited to modern urban society. Most temples today have kitchens serving the sangha, and monks are aware of this, but they choose not to see, hear, or know. Mahayana Buddhists are stricter vegetarians, but often eat too much, having 2 or 3 elaborate meals a day, mimicking meat dishes almost perfectly. This may be a way of deceiving oneself, nurturing cravings and attachments. Therefore, both monastic and lay practitioners must be vigilant in their actions. The significance of eating vegetarian lies more in the intent behind it than the food itself. If we cannot resist eating meat or fish, we should remember that an animal endured pain and death for our pleasure and sustenance. While chewing an animal's flesh, we should also be mindful of our own impermanence. Readers may have found answers to the questions raised earlier in this section. However, the question, "Did the Buddha eat meat?" is delicate and worth careful thought. Asking this implies comparing our actions with the Buddha's, comparing our dualistic, formulaic understanding with the Buddha's supernatural, non-dualistic wisdom, comparing our ignorance with the Buddha's awakened intellect, comparing our entangled mind with the Buddha's enlightened mind. This question is flawed and thus cannot have a correct answer. The Buddha abandoned his palace and luxuries to live an ascetic life, with no intention of seeking delicious food. Ascetics often ate minimal food, sometimes only a sesame seed a day. Although the Buddha later recognized the error in such extreme practice, he did not turn to seeking luxurious foods. The Buddha survived to teach us the Dharma with the simplest meal offered by a servant girl from a nearby village. Thus, we should not concern ourselves with what the Buddha ate, but instead question whether we can understand his teachings. The Mahaparinibbana Sutta describes the Buddha's last meal, which included an uncertain dish, pork or a mushroom. Many Western scholars have studied the ancient language, concluding it was a type of mushroom called pig's delight. This mushroom was named so because pigs' keen sense of smell helped find them, similar to how Europeans use pigs and dogs to hunt the prized truffle, often called black diamonds for their high cost. Some researchers focused on identifying mushrooms in the region where the Buddha passed away. Others studied ancient dialects of North India, claiming it was a type of dried, ground pork. Numerous articles discuss this topic today. This exemplifies the pitfalls of rigid adherence to scriptures passed down orally for centuries and the crude entanglements of our minds. Fixating on an unclear word leads to unnecessary doubt, possibly dangerous. To illustrate this perspective further, consider the following example, although it may not fully align with the Dharma, but is concrete and easy to understand. With our conventional dualistic understanding, we label this as a piece of meat and that as a mushroom. However, even a novice practitioner can perceive both as mere aggregations of atomic particles brought together by various conditions. From an atomic perspective, meat and mushrooms are indistinguishable, as atoms consist of nuclei and orbiting electrons within empty space. Ultimately, as practitioners, we should choose foods that do not cause suffering to other beings and do not create negative karma for ourselves. In conclusion, practice should not get bogged down by trivial concerns, but aim higher, seeking the profound nature of all phenomena, cultivating compassion, and developing wisdom to achieve enlightenment and liberation. We should not obsess over food choices, but focus on understanding and embodying the Buddhist teachings. 3. Discussing the meaning of vegetarianism. This section begins with a few questions. Have you ever practiced vegetarianism? If so, since when? And do you do it sporadically on a fixed schedule, or are you a strict vegetarian? For those who have never practiced vegetarianism, this discussion and the points raised here might not be of much concern. Conversely, for those who do practice vegetarianism, the following questions are significant. In what circumstances do you practice vegetarianism? What motivates you to do so? Many people practice vegetarianism for various reasons and with different goals. However, we can broadly categorize them into 3 cases. Case 1. Vegetarianism for health. Some practice vegetarianism to preserve their health and avoid serious illnesses. This form of vegetarianism was discussed in the first part of this article, which considers vegetarianism from a scientific perspective. Medical science and research have extensively studied vegetarianism. Many Buddhist doctors, pharmacists, nutritionists, and physiologists have presented and developed this topic. These writings demonstrate the health benefits of vegetarianism. Promoting vegetarianism for health reasons is beneficial, but is not inherently Buddhist. It is simply a way to cling to the impermanent physical body through a vegetarian diet, indirectly reinforcing the illusion of the self. Buddhists eat vegetarian simply without expecting anything in return. Health benefits are secondary or incidental, since our health depends on numerous karmic and circumstantial factors. Even strict vegetarians can develop cancer or heart disease because their vegetarianism cannot counteract other strong karmas. Some people reluctantly practice vegetarianism due to tradition, family pressure, or circumstances such as illness. This article will not delve further into these cases. Case 2. Vegetarianism, motivated by deeper reasons. Some are driven by profound reasons to practice vegetarianism. For example, a French judo champion who had won numerous European and world championships decided to stop eating bloody steaks after a motorcycle accident left his calf torn open, revealing red, bloody flesh that reminded him of a steak. Another example is the 19th century French poet Alphonse de Lamartine, who as a child asked his mother to let him practice vegetarianism after witnessing the blood and stench of a slaughterhouse. These stories have no explicit Buddhist elements, but something within these individuals' consciousness prompted them to reject meat. This feeling may not be full-fledged compassion, but a subtle manifestation of kindness, which, although vague, is an initial emotional response to the suffering of sentient beings or fellow humans. Many people have similar experiences, which vary depending on the circumstances. If we pay attention, we can easily observe such suffering in our daily lives, such as witnessing the slaughter of animals or roadkill. While we might be momentarily moved by these scenes, we often forget them quickly. This forgetfulness happens because our inherent seeds of kindness are still obscured by selfishness and ego. These initial positive and compassionate feelings are easily forgotten if we cannot recognize and nurture them. These seeds symbolize the Buddha nature within us. Discussing these vague motivations for vegetarianism may not be necessary, as such feelings might lead to vegetarianism, but are not directly related to its significance in Buddhism. Case 3. Conscious and committed Buddhist vegetarians. Some Buddhists practice vegetarianism with clear awareness and commitment. For them, what is the significance of vegetarianism? This section will provide detailed examples for each case. Example 1. Conditional vegetarianism. Some people only practice vegetarianism under specific conditions. For instance, a parent might vow to be vegetarian for 3 months if their child passes an exam, praying earnestly to the Buddhas. If the child succeeds, they keep their vow. This form of vegetarianism is more of a transaction with the Buddhas than a genuine Buddhist practice. Buddhists must understand that a child's success depends primarily on their intelligence and efforts, closely linked to their karma, regardless of external factors. If the child fails, the parent might blame the Buddhas for not answering their sincere prayers. Alternatively, the parent might regret making such a high vow and, after a month of struggling with vegetarianism, may look forward to the end of the 3 months to indulge in their cravings. They might even ask the Buddhas to excuse them for breaking their vow early, thinking that their child would have passed the exam regardless. Such forms of vegetarianism are not Buddhist practices, but self-imposed hardships due to ignorance. The joy and relief felt after completing the vow are mere illusions created by the mind. These sensations, whether of suffering or joy, are ultimately meaningless from a Buddhist perspective. Example 2. Disconnected from compassion. Consider 2 individuals who practice vegetarianism sincerely on the 1st and 15th days of the lunar month. One sells fish and the other buys fish. The seller, busy slaughtering frogs, sells a fish to the buyer. Despite the visible suffering of the animals, neither shows any compassion. These scenes have become so familiar that they no longer perceive the pain inflicted on these creatures. Even if selling or buying is necessary for livelihood, at least they should silently acknowledge the suffering of these animals. Such detachment shows that their vegetarianism has no meaningful impact on their attitudes and behaviors, reflecting ignorance born of habit and insensitivity. Example 3. True Buddhist vegetarians. True Buddhist vegetarians, such as monks and some lay practitioners, see vegetarianism as natural. For them, vegetarianism simplifies their food choices and reduces attachment to taste. Mahayana scriptures often liken a bodhisattva's refusal to eat meat to a mother's inability to eat her child. Their consciousness is free from the thought of consuming meat. For them, vegetarianism serves to uphold precepts and cultivate compassion. In the Lankavatara Sutra, the Buddha said, "It is not correct to consider it reasonable and permissible to eat the flesh of an animal not killed by oneself or not killed specifically for oneself. I prohibit all meat eating with no exceptions." These teachings, as translated by Philip Capleo in A Buddhist Case for Vegetarianism, emphasize strict adherence to a vegetarian diet. The 6th patriarch Huineng, after inheriting the Dharma from Hongren, lived among hunters and only ate vegetables cooked with their meat. The prohibition of killing is reiterated in many Buddhist scriptures, such as the Vinaya, Anguttara Nikaya, and Samyutta Nikaya. Precepts are an integral part of the Dharma. Without them, Buddhism would lose its essence and might not have survived. Vegetarianism holds a higher meaning than merely observing precepts. Buddhism teaches us to recognize the pervasive suffering in the cycle of samsara. Practicing vegetarianism reduces this suffering, promoting non-violence. True Buddhist vegetarians are truly courageous, non-cooperative, and outside the fray, avoiding the endless cycle of craving and killing. We must note that if a vegetarian clings to their practice, refusing to share meals with meat eaters, this attachment contradicts Buddhist teachings. Although most discussions on vegetarianism focus on maintaining precepts and compassion, it is essential to look inward and examine how vegetarianism affects our consciousness and actions. Vegetarianism is not merely about maintaining precepts or seeking physical purity or saving lives. Even lifelong vegetarians cannot save many sentient beings from ignorance and greed. If vegetarianism is seen only as such, it remains an attachment to ignorance. Vegetarianism should be a daily practice to cultivate compassion, improving our minds to be more peaceful and empathetic. Ultimately, compassion leads to wisdom, and wisdom leads to enlightenment. Therefore, true Buddhist vegetarianism is an active, noble, and non-violent practice. It nourishes compassion, providing the ground for wisdom to grow. A bodhisattva meditating in a cave does not aim to save a few animals, but to cultivate boundless compassion for all beings. Vegetarianism should actively transform the mind. Indifference or insensitivity renders it meaningless. From this point, let us explore further and elevate our consciousness beyond dualistic concepts of vegetarianism and non-vegetarianism, beyond the constraints of precepts and accumulated virtues, beyond literal scriptures. This topic is extensive and will be addressed in a subsequent section. For vegetarianism, environment, and life. Even if we open the door to vegetarianism inwardly to step straight into our consciousness, if we still distinguish between inside and outside, between our mind and the external environment, between our own life and that of other beings, it means we are still clinging to the concept of our own life. To nurture this life, we decide to eat or not eat the life of other beings, and this distinction is a way of holding on to the ego. So, what is the relationship and position of our body, mind, and life concerning the general life of all sentient beings in this samsaric world? Some Buddhist authors defend their stance on eating meat by arguing that vegetarians, when boiling vegetables, kill countless tiny beings in the plants and water. This observation is accurate because we cannot completely avoid all violence and mistreatment of sentient beings, whether intentional or accidental, whether advocating nonviolence or practicing asceticism. Over 2,500 years ago, when humans had no microscopes, the Buddha taught that a single drop of water contains innumerable living beings. When drinking a sip of water, when bathing, we inadvertently harm the lives of these beings. However, we should understand that the lives of these microorganisms are very primitive and lack the emotions, such as fear or love, that more evolved sentient beings possess. So what are sentient beings in life? The scriptures divide the samsaric world into three realms or worlds, known as the three worlds, Tridhatu: the world of desire, the world of form, and the formless world. The world of desire, Kamadhatu, includes 6 types of beings distributed across 6 levels of evolution: hell beings, hungry ghosts, Preta, animals, humans, demigods, asura, and gods, Deva. However, within the human level, hellish scenarios can occur, such as imprisonment, torture, disease, poverty, abuse, and slavery. Likewise, humans can exhibit qualities akin to hungry ghosts, greed and malice; animals, ignorance and stupidity; or higher beings like gods and saints. The common traits of sentient beings in the world of desire are the desires to eat, indulge in sensual pleasures, and fear death. These are the fundamental instincts that bind sentient beings to the endless cycle of rebirth and existence, originating from primordial ignorance. Vegetarianism is a method to help dissolve the instinct to eat and the blind attachment to one's own survival. The instincts to engage in sensual pleasures and fear death require other methods to be addressed, which are beyond the scope of vegetarianism. Sentient beings in the world of desire possess 19 faculties that scriptures describe as polluted, including A, 6 sensory faculties, 5 senses in the mind, as Buddhism considers the mind the 6th sense; B, the faculty of life; C, 2 sexual faculties, male and female; D, 5 faculties that produce karma, including the faculties of pleasure, Sukhendriya; pain, Dukhendriya; joy, Somanasyendriya; mental suffering, Dormanasyendriya; and indifference, Upekshindriya; E, 5 faculties leading to moral conduct, including faith, Sradendriya; effort, Viryendriya; mindfulness, Smrtindriya; concentration, Samadindriya; and wisdom, Prajnendriya. To make this classification more complete, we can look at the characteristics of the other 2 realms, the world of form and the formless world. The world of form is the realm of gods and saints, beings with form but fewer faculties than those in the world of desire, lacking sexual faculties, and 3 of the 5 faculties that produce karma. The formless world is the realm of great gods, beings who have transcended physical form, retaining only the mental faculty while lacking sensory faculties and sexual faculties. These beings possess fewer faculties compared to those in the world of form and the world of desire. In reality, in the world of desire, we can easily recognize various types of beings coexisting and interacting at different levels, from hellish conditions and hungry ghosts to animals, humans, and higher beings. The world of form and the formless world are more refined and subtle, beyond the dualistic and conventional understanding of science. Beings in these realms still interact with us in the samsaric world, but only a few with highly developed spirituality can perceive and interact with them. In scientific terms, the world of desire is divided into 3 realms: the mineral realm, the plant realm, and the animal realm. The mineral realm, in general, lacks life but undergoes constant changes and reactions based on physical conditions. For example, water freezes below 0 degrees Celsius and evaporates above 100 degrees Celsius. Salt dissolves in water but recrystallizes when the water evaporates. These changes, simple as they may seem, are part of the complex and subtle transformations in the material world, showing that the boundary between matter and energy is not distinct. Quantum physics and astronomy, reveal these transformations, requiring advanced tools or mathematics to understand or predict phenomena that are not directly observable. The mineral realm includes part of the material makeup of human bodies and the bodies of all sentient beings in samsara. Therefore, all beings, life, consciousness, and actions, including karma, originate from conditioned formations. Besides the mineral realm, there are the plant and animal realms. Usually, we see multicellular organisms in these realms. Unicellular organisms like viruses and bacteria require scientific methods and tools such as microscopes to observe. These microorganisms are ubiquitous, living in harsh environments, on and inside our bodies, and playing both beneficial and harmful roles. They are the basic food for multicellular organisms and the source of diseases. Unicellular organisms in the plant and animal realms do not differ significantly, with the boundary between them being very thin. However, multicellular animals have more complex capabilities than plants. The scriptures state that sentient beings in the world of desire possess 19 faculties, whereas plants do not have all these faculties, or their potential is minimal. This distinction is why vegetarians only consume plants. However, plant life can also be complex. For example, the mimosa plant reacts to touch by folding its leaves. Recent scientific discoveries reveal that some plant roots secrete toxins to kill surrounding plants, protecting their living environment. Given this complexity of life, how should we define vegetarianism? If we rigidly adhere to what is considered vegetarian, we might face many contradictions. The boundary between plants and animals is not absolute, but the best criterion to define vegetarianism. Recognizing our position and interconnection with other sentient beings in the world of desire and the entire samsaric world is challenging. Scientifically, all forms of life are interconnected, supporting and destroying each other. In this context, defining vegetarianism is delicate. Should we transcend the constraints of vegetarianism to achieve a state of complete integration with life, forgetting our ego and merging our life with all beings? Understanding vegetarianism in this way means respecting and loving all forms of life as we do our own. In the existence of all beings, our presence is also there, albeit in a small, humble, and seemingly insignificant way. Ernst Haeckel, 1834–1919, a renowned German zoologist and embryologist, observed that the development of a human embryo recapitulates the evolutionary stages of animals, from a single-celled organism to a complex mammal. His statement, "Ontogenesis is a short recapitulation of phylogenesis," reflects the interconnectedness of an individual with the evolutionary process of the entire species and life in general. This observation aligns with the Buddhist concept of interdependence, encompassing past, present, and future life of all beings. In conclusion, understanding these insights leads to treating all beings with friendliness, love, and avoiding unnecessary violence. Letting go of the ego and harmoniously integrating with all forms of life, from flowers to grass, from humans to saints, respecting and loving all forms of life across past, present, and future, is the true conduct of a Buddhist. This broad and expansive approach transcends the simple definition of vegetarianism. 5. Conclusion. Adopting vegetarianism based on scientific understanding and discoveries to promote better health does not inherently align with Buddhist principles. Regardless of how healthy one might be, the body will inevitably face issues, as it cannot escape illness and death. Viewing vegetarianism as a transaction or exchange with the Buddhas is self-imposing, a debt or a form of self-torment, which is not only un-Buddhist, but also harmful to both body and mind. Practicing vegetarianism while being indifferent to the suffering of sentient beings is a futile act. True Buddhist vegetarianism should manifest compassion, creating a fertile ground for wisdom to grow. Transcending the mere concept of vegetarianism and non-vegetarianism to harmoniously integrate one's mind and body with all beings, regardless of their size, visibility, past, or future. Whether dull and pitiful, vicious like hungry ghosts, or gentle and noble like devas and saints in the realms of desire, form, and formlessness, is even better. To contribute further to the conclusion, the author wishes to share a poem. These verses were written long ago and are included here to highlight two themes. First, the concept of interdependence, interaction, and mutual creation of all entities and events in the world around us. Second, the continuous fluctuation, creation, and destruction of all phenomena and life in particular. In this constant flux, we cannot see ourselves anywhere. The conclusion of the poem is the Buddha's smile, symbolizing enlightenment. The wooden statue on the pedestal, the Buddha statue sits still. I hear echoes within each grain of wood. There's the chirping of birds in the forest, the rustling of leaves, and the whispering promises of worms. On the wood grain lines, I see green on the branches, the rosy hues of the clouds. In the cracks, there is the warm sun, the breath of life in the cells. In the contours of the face, there's the presence of the craftsman. In the gentle eyes, the hands of the sculptor. Soaked in each vein of the wood, the tree sap from the earth, the spring water from the river. In the fragrance, the statue sits quietly on the pedestal. In the smoky haze, I sit quietly on the mat. Suddenly, I hear the gnawing sound of termites in the wood or buds in the mat. In my body, countless microorganisms like the sands of the Ganges, they live, proliferate, and gnaw. Startled in panic, I look up through the thin smoke, gentle and benevolent. The statue smiles in the fragrance.